Hi there, Loren Crawford. This week I wanted to talk about the root center. So getting to the root of the matter. To me, this is an important part of our physiology, an important part of our energy body. When we start to do yoga, whether we perceive yoga as a physical process, whether we perceive yoga as a spiritual process, whether we receive or perceive yoga as a well-being process. At somewhere in any of those perceptions, we connect to yoga as a healing practice. If you're more of a physically inclined or oriented yogi, your physical healing might be that you have back issues and you started doing yoga and it made your back feel better. It could be that you have tight hips and you started doing asana and it helped your hips to open up so you could be more comfortable. If you're moving, though, into a deeper concept of healing, then this may look a little bit different. So from a broader perspective, the healing aspect of yoga is very much holistic. And that's where this idea of root comes in. So not that the root is the only area to focus on for healing, but it's an important one. Oftentimes, when we think of healing modalities, we may gravitate towards heart stuff, heart opening, heart-centered healing. And that's because when we're wounded, we often feel, especially the emotional side of it, in the chest at the heart area. And so the natural default is, I got to heal my heart. I would actually caution against that approach, at least initially. So what I would propose is that a lot of the healing we need to start with is at the root center, is at the base of the torso, is in the pelvic region. Why? So the teachings of yoga are actually quite clear about this, and those who have practiced these techniques and over really millennia know about the importance of understanding the energy body and how it works. So at the root center, we have the most primal of our urges are based in that part of the anatomy. So what are these primal urges? So think about what we need to do in our lives, right? As beings, we need to sleep. We need to eat. We need to have some kind of shelter. We need to procreate. And also, we need to stay alive. So there's that notion of us being animals, and yes, we need to stay alive. Those are the primal urges that are there at the root area. There's another aspect too that's interesting, and it's our connection to tribe. So our connection to who and what we're familiar with, who and what looks like us, who and what thinks like us. And that sense of tribe is really a connecting thing, a sense of community, a sense of belonging. Examples of tribe might be religious affiliation. It could be political parties. It could be social movements. It could be associated on, race and heritage background, these kinds of things. It might even be as simple as occupations. So we have specific tribes to which we affiliate, right? It could be the LGBTQ2 plus community, for example. We all have some connections to tribe. And being part of a community or tribe is actually fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But when we're too attached to that tribe, but sometimes the connection to tribe become problematic. Our worldview might start to become limited. Our way of thinking might start to become dogmatic. Our way of the othering of people who don't look like us or act like us becomes the way. Even though it's tribal, what it ends up being is separation, separating you from those who don't look like, be like, or act like you. With regard to the primal urges, let's look at eating, let's look at sex. You can see how these can become faulty, how we can develop eating issues, eating conditions. You can also see how around sex, there can also be issues around addiction, there can be issues around sexual dysfunction, that sort of thing. So when the energies at the root are off, it affects us in many, many ways. On the level of fear, think of us as evolved animals. So what do animals have to do? Well, these primal urges, and the biggest one is stay alive. So because we are part of the animal kingdom, right? Our limbic system is such that its a natural response is to protect us, right? We hear a fire alarm and we jolt. We smell smoke and we jolt, because that's our body's innate will and desire to stay alive. And what is that based on? It's fear. So at the root, fear is there. And it comes from this notion of staying alive, the most primal of fears, right? But all fears emanate from that big one. When we live in a society that's steeped in fear, then we can never truly thrive. Then we can never truly evolve to our higher selves, to our higher beings. It keeps us stuck. Look at what we're living in now. So we're living in a pandemic. It's fear on steroids. So we're having this experience that's really throwing us off. We don't know if we're going to get this virus. We are going to take a vaccine that's new and not really tested. You know, there's fear around being next to other people, being in groups. There's fear around loss of income, loss of money, loss of property, in my case, right? So there's lots of fear. And even prior to the pandemic, there was so much and is so much fear in our society. You need only turn on the news and see that I would say 90% of the news coverage is fear-based, right? The economy is plummeting. You know, there's war here, there's typhoons there, fear, fear, fear. And then so this becomes almost like the way of being, so much fear. And this is all steeped in root energy. So what do we do to begin to heal? To begin to heal these energies related to primal urges and the fear-based situation, and maybe our connection to tribe that's not as healthy and balanced as it could be? Well, we're going to look at the yoga tradition's root-based practices. And I'm going to share with you 5 practices that I think will be really, really helpful to address these issues of root area problems. I would like you to take some time and reflect about any issues that are related to food, that are related to sex and intimacy, that are related to shelter and home, that are related to your other urges, sleep issues. Hello, we have chronic insomnia in this society. Your fear-based stuff. And there's lots of fear. So please don't dismiss this, okay? So here's 5 techniques, practices that I think will be of huge help to you. The first one is about the pelvis and getting connected to your pelvis. We did the whole last lecture, and if you didn't listen to it, go listen to it, on stability. And the pelvic stability is key and essential to balanced energies in the root. Last week, we were talking about it a little bit more structurally and somewhat energetically, but now I want you to think of a strong and stable pelvic area as essential to healing root energies and the psychospiritual connections to the root center. So a strong and stable pelvis. The second technique I'm going to talk about may sound a little bit odd if you've not practiced it. It's Ashwini Mudra, the horse gesture. And so a mudra is just a way of working with energy, right? We often do finger mudras, but there's mudras you can do within the body too. This one is at the anus. Yes. So we contract and release, squeeze and release the anal sphincter. So that contraction and releasing starts to move energy in the pelvic floor in very powerful ways. So this is quite a gross mudra in the sense that you really feel, right, the musculature of it. And so you could do this at the beginning of your asana practice, at the end of your asana practice. You could just do it as a standalone practice, some squeezing and releasing. Maybe you do 3 sets of 9 repetitions or 9 squeezes. And this is going to just start to shift energy in the pelvic floor, the root area. You'll be amazed. It's pretty powerful. The next thing I'd like to talk about are standing poses. So these may be more obvious to you and maybe a little bit more accessible. So big, strong standing poses. And I like to think of the lateral poses. So think of your triangle pose. Legs are open. There's a lot of energy coming up from that grounded connection to the floor, up through the inner thighs into the pelvic floor again, the pelvis. So strong leg engaging energy is really, really helpful here to shift energy in the root pelvic floor area. So triangle pose, you could think of goddess pose, you could think of your warrior two as well. So there's a few of them, right? The strong standing poses are going to have strong energy right up into that root area. The next practice is a bandha. They're energy locks is kind of the classic translation of that word, but they're kind of refined. So the Mula Bandha root lock, Mula Bandha, is really, really key to healing the energies of the root center. The name tells you that. So how I suggest learning how to engage this energy is by way of physical movement, asana. If you start out in table position, you take your inhalation, you exhale, sink your seat to your heels, your chest to your thighs, let your chin drop a little bit. That floating back, your abdominal wall pulls towards the spine, and as it's pulling towards the spine, the perineum draws up ever so slightly. So the body's floating back, the abdominal wall's pulling towards the spine, and you'll feel a subtle lifting at the perineum, so the area just between the genitals and the anus. And that anterior wall, the inside of it, draws up. It's ever so slight. And then as you come back up to fours, the abdomen expands on the inhalation. That contraction at that perineum wall is going to release. So it's this subtle. On the exhalation, it lifts, and on the inhalation, it moves back, right? Subtle, subtle, subtle. But if you pay attention, you'll start to feel that on the movement, the dynamic movement in Chakrabakasana, from table back to child, back up to table, back to child. A subtle technique, right? But that energy, that subtle lifting and releasing is going to really start to shift again, energy in and around the root area. Powerful. The last thing I want to talk about in terms of techniques are the longer exhalations. So the quintessential yoga breath is moving into a longer exhalation. So as you get comfortable in practice and you're able to work with the longer exhalation, and this doesn't have to be through a whole physical yoga practice, it might just be as you're moving into forward folds that you can elongate the exhalation. There's a natural relationship to the folding and longer exhalations, right? You might work with it a little bit in pranayama where you work with, deliberately slowing down the exhalation. You can slow down the exhalation when you come into Shavasana. That's kind of the easiest way to start to work with this. So the longer exhalation is really related to the energy of kind of the letting go, the releasing kind of stuff, right? And that's what we need to do around some of these issues at the root. Those are some practices, root-centered practices that you can look at as you begin to delve deeper into your yoga journey and exploring it from a healing perspective. I hope this has been informative and maybe stokes your curiosity and you're going to go try some of these. If you have any questions about them, just drop me a note, let me know. You can comment in the comment section below. And if you haven't already, please make sure to sign up for my weekly shares. Take good care.